Alright, real quick, time for another one of these videos. I know I technically don't have to wear this mask, as I've already done a face reveal, but it's part of my brand, and I've committed to it. Now we're going to be talking about what's killing BM2. BM2's updates have been plagued with stagnation for a long time now. It's mostly due to playable villains, but there's another factor at play here. We're also going to touch upon how this affects the future FF games like M2, as M2 hasn't reached this point in its development yet, and I've also gotten some cameo bits from other people who feel a similar way about the current state of 4FAT's games. Alright, time to talk about the quality of these villains. Now, I'm gonna kind of keep this section brief, as it's mostly what DGM's talking about, but I'm more so talking about why the villains are the quality that they are. Now, if you haven't noticed this, villains like Gilius, Smasher, Golden Bloodcage to some extent, and a bunch of others are very similar to the point of having the exact same moveset on paper. If you were to write down all of the basic components of their moveset, they would be the same, with slight variation in, hitboxes, damage, etc. Now, the reason for this is just to hit a quota of villains. It's not because the devs had ideas for unique movesets or anything like that. They just had a quota of villains they wanted to meet, and they pumped as many into the update as possible to meet that quota. It was more about whether or not the villain looked cool, or the community was asking for it, rather than if the villain had a moveset in mind. And most of them don't. Rusty and A6 exist in the exact same update just to fill a character quota. That is the only reason they exist. Not only that, but because, Quack didn't want to completely scrap the Rusty stuff he did for the update, because, a majority of the problems with the villains update kind of sort of relate to laziness and just rush development in general, which is problematic, to say the least. Now, what's the key problem with, having all of these villains? If it was just, oh, these characters aren't interesting, then it wouldn't be that big of an issue. But the key problem with the villains updates in general is that it essentially means that BM2 doesn't get any interesting updates ever anymore. Think about it. We haven't gotten any interesting updates since Endless. The only thing added to BM2 since the Endless update that wasn't just villains was Boss Rush. And Boss Rush is kind of terrible. It's just a bunch of AI playable villains, not even bosses. There's like 4 or 5 non-playable villains that you fight in Boss Rush, and a lot of the playable villains you do fight weren't even bosses in the campaign. Number 1, the name's stupid. And number 2, that's not what people want when they ask for a boss rush. They want an actual boss rush, and not just fighting playable villains over and over and over again in a gauntlet. Now, the boss rush thing leads into another problem with the villains in general, that being the unlock conditions. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have super difficult unlock conditions for each of these super secret villains, but when they don't work, when they literally do not work, there's a problem. All of the PvP ones are bugged. Back when you had to do the 2v2 Dark for Angel, back when that wasn't, normal mode, I did it, still didn't get Lorat. Lorat and Angel have essentially the same requirements. Angel's just a bit more difficult, and Lorat just wouldn't unlock. Couldn't get him to unlock back when the first update came out either. Huggins was an issue at the launch of the original update. People couldn't get him. Essentially, every single one of these updates is rushed out so fast that a lot of the unlock conditions just straight up don't work. There was a large period of time where DGM was unlocked by beating the campaign on normal mode in a straight shoot rather than dark mode, and that was not fixed for months. I'm not even completely sure it's fixed now, but I know it wasn't fixed for at least a long time after the Villains update, because I did it on the Switch version like 6 months after the update came out, and it still worked that way. There's just no quality control when it comes to actually making these unlock conditions work. They're just cranked out as fast as possible just to keep interest in the game alive, rather than adding literally any sort of substance to the game. And here's the last part, last thing I have to say in general about this. Why does this matter? Now, again, we haven't gotten any interesting updates to BM2, in years at this point. Years. So, whatever. BM2 is a game that came out in 2018. It's had its heyday. It's essentially dead now from an update standpoint. Whatever. That's kind of the trend that 4Fats games have in general. BM1 bit the dust very quickly after the next game came out, etc. It's kind of how it goes. But here's the issue. As soon as villains are introduced to Maximus 2, that game dies as well. That game's updates will become stagnation. There will be stagnated. There will be no more interesting updates, etc. Not only that, but playable villains just straight up won't work in M2. Talents won't be usable. Skins obviously won't be a thing. Talents not being usable is kind of a really, really big deal, considering it's what makes each character unique and is a very, very important part of progression. Yeah, that whole system just won't apply to playable villains at all. Cool. And here's the fun thing. Playable villains are already in development for M2. Woo. We already have confirmation of at least 2 in the form of gameplay. Fun. Now, playable villains inherently aren't a bad thing. It's just that almost all of the ones in BM2 come with a myriad of problems. And as soon as they're added to a game, you can say goodbye to any update that's remotely interesting at all. Now, to close up this video, I got the cameo sections. The first one's from DGM. The second one is an interview with CK because he really wanted to just do an interview during Maximus 2 for some reason, but whatever. That's all I have to say myself, so.
Hello, peeps. This is Moof Games Gamer. I'm using an AI voice here. And I'm contributing to Mecha Knuckles' video expressing my personal opinions about Blackmoor 2's positive and negative aspects, respectively. Some of my sayings might be divisive, but remember, these are my opinions, so please no Twitter stands in the comments, please. 99.9% of the fucking villain roster. Me run, me hit harder, and me fucking use lazy combo super yay so riveting and interesting. Blackmoor 2's villains can be hit or miss. A good amount of them share the same or at least similar moveset formats that they don't really stand out, unfortunately. I like villains that have their own set that feels distinct and unique. Look at Gilius and Rusty, for example. Sure, Dark General Marrow has a dash attack and a combo super, which is made by Quack in that area. But comparatively, he's the most unique and distinctive villain character in BM2's playable roster. He has moves that no other villain in the roster has, and that's what I prefer. Characters like Bulkrux, Straxar, Hannibal, Envoy, Berghoff, and such stand out because their movesets are unique to them and aren't copy-pasted. At least villains are slightly getting better, but it's still accurate to say that some of the villains have the same basic moveset formula with little to no variety at all. I personally wouldn't mind having more playable villains, just as long as there's something new alongside with them, like the Boss Rush update. Literally before that, the only new content added to the game was * Endless Mode in the Frank update. If it's just gonna be some villains, it's not gonna last that long. I would go more in depth here, but for now I'll conclude my segment here. Give this vid a like, and if you have some interesting opinions of the game, feel free to comment here. See ya peeps next time.
Oh my god, the PC port of M2 is so atrocious.
So is it lagging?
It is lagging.
No, I don't have
It lagged on the friggin' title screen, by the way. Let's get down to what the actual point of the video is. What are your problems with the state of FF games as of now? Blackmoor 2 specifically, that's the main focus of the video, but why not? Go ahead.
Multiplayer. It just lags. It always does.
How do you feel about the quality of the BM2 villains?
Well, some of them, like the early ones, did actually have a lot of playtesting done to them. Because it just took a long time, I'm pretty sure, for them to make them. But I feel like right now it's just, yeah, let's just get a few villains in so that the community will stop screaming about updates.
That's essentially what it is. The community's screaming constantly about villains.
Yeah.
Like, the devs will post something about Fatlands, and then the community will ask, that's cool, add all of those dudes to BM2 as playable villains.
Because the community cries out for so many film updates, the developers don't really fix that many bugs. At least not that many bugs that should be fixed. With M2, Like, when I said I was being stunlocked by 2 ally rats, Clock immediately fixed that.
Immediately, as soon as playable villains start being added to friggin' M2, that's all we're gonna get, is nothing but playable villains.
Oh, I hope not.